ideas and the words we use to articulate them change the world.
What does it take to put your life's work out there in a really big way? How much can I do with this one precious life? Welcome to The Selfish Gift. What if you have important ideas to share, but you aren't a writer or you don't have time to write a book? My guest today is going to help us to understand what it takes to create a successful book with the help of a ghostwriter. Dan Gerstein is founder and CEO of Gotham Ghostwriters, the country's premier ghostwriting agency, specializing in sophisticated long-form writing like books, speeches, and reports for authors, speakers, and thinkers who need expert help telling and selling their stories. Dan has been writing and communicating professionally for more than 30 years, first as a journalist, then as a Capitol Hill speechwriter, communications strategist, and political consultant. Dan's writing has appeared in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and Politico, and he's also appeared regularly on television as a political analyst for CNN, MSNBC, and others. Dan lives in New York City. Dan, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Maggie. It's great to talk with you.
So as a speechwriter and a communication strategist, you've worked on 2 presidential campaigns. That's amazing.
I have. It seems like another lifetime ago.
Who did you write speeches for? And tell me some high points from your speechwriting career.
Sure. So I grew up in Connecticut, just outside of Hartford, and my home state senator was a guy named Joe Lieberman. And, my journey into politics started with Bill Clinton getting elected president. When he was running, I got really excited. And, I'll tell you a quick story. I was on July 4th, I was at a wedding of one of my college roommates, and I was table with some other folks. And one of them worked on Capitol Hill, and we were talking politics. She could see how excited I was about Bill Clinton. She's like, if he wins, you got to move to Washington. And she kind of convinced me in the space of 30 minutes, and it kind of changed the course of my life. I don't know if you've ever had an inflection moment
Totally.
like that. And I moved to Washington, didn't have a job, and then I ended up volunteering in Senator Lieberman's office because I had heard he had a really great communications team, and it was true. His communications director ended up becoming a mentor of mine, and I got hired over time to become his speechwriter. It just so happened that the speechwriter had been fired a couple months before I showed up. And after I proved myself, they first hired me on his re-election campaign, and then I got hired full-time in his Washington office. So
Amazing.
I worked on his vice presidential campaign in 2000, and then when Al Gore announced, he ran with Al Gore, and then when Al Gore announced that he wasn't going to run for president again in 2004, Senator Lieberman decided he was going to run for the Democratic nomination. So we helped launch his campaign in 2003. All the way through the primaries in early 2004, he was not successful. It was not his time. And after that, that's when I ended up leaving politics.
Wow. That's, I mean, like high stakes writing, right? Like you're putting consequential words in somebody else's mouth. I'm really curious about this because, most of us, when we're thinking about writing, we're thinking about putting ourselves out there. You're putting, your talent and your creative product out there, but it is someone else's ideas, mission, voice, and literally their mouth that the words have to come out of. Do you think that not being publicly associated with the words themselves, you personally, does that make it easier or harder?
I think in some cases it makes it easier. And I would say when you're a professional book ghostwriter, a lot of the writers that we work with, that we place with authors, one of the reasons a lot of them enjoy it and they write under their own name as well is because it gives them that freedom, because it's not your darlings that you have to kill sometimes, that it takes some of the pressure off. But in the case of when I was a speechwriter, no, I don't think it made it any easier, just in the sense that I felt fully invested in Senator Lieberman and our team. It really was like a family to me. And so it's not so much I felt the pressure, but I felt a real duty to help him succeed.
Right.
And so I took a lot of pride in my work. I will tell you, you asked about one of my highlights, so probably the most consequential speech I ever worked on was, this takes me back to President Clinton, but after the scandal with Monica Lewinsky and, he acknowledged the affair, Senator Lieberman, who had been an early supporter of President Clinton and a political ally of his during the time he was in the White House, felt betrayed. And he was very upset, as much about the lying as he was the infidelity. And he felt he had no choice but to say something. And so he told me that he wanted to give a speech on the Senate floor that condemned the president's behavior and say this is not acceptable from an American president. Put it in some historical context. And I got very lucky because I was an American history major. I had some books on the shelves that I had read in college that I could go back to, and I made my parents proud that my college education was actually coming into professional use. And I work with him on, I think ultimately there were, well over 50 drafts,
wow.
Not, new drafts, but 50 iterations of the speech. I mean, he put a lot of time and thought into it. And one of the reasons I'm so proud of it is because, first of all, Senator Lieberman really, really cared about it. And it was a true collaboration. He wrote as much as I did. And that was the model of our work together. Was I never felt like I was putting words in his mouth. I was really just helping him articulate his thoughts, his visions, his arguments in the best version of his voice.
And that's
and I always look to
that's really what a great ghostwriter does. It's not about thinking for your client. It's about helping them to shape what they have to say. Now not all of your work with Senator Lieberman was quite so heavy and consequential, right? You had tell me about the contest.
Yeah, well, one of the fun parts of being a speechwriter for him, especially once he rose to national prominence, was I got to write a fair amount of humorous material for him, and people didn't think of him as a funny guy, but he had a really good Borscht Belt sense of humor. And one of the fun things I did was I got to work on with the writers for David Letterman. He did a top 10 after he ran for vice president. But the real high point was he got invited to participate in the funniest celebrity in Washington contest. And it was a charity fundraising event, and it was a lot of fun. And one of the things they did was they invited serious politicians and journalists who maybe were not known as for their comedic talents to, take a risk and get up on stage and tell jokes. And
it sounds like it could have been a total cringe fest.
It could have been, but we had some really good material. And I very much come from the Jewish tradition of joke writing, and we like to think that anything that's Jewish is 10% funnier than it, just because of that. And the clincher was a few years earlier, Al Franken, the former comedian then turned senator, had written a book about his mock presidential campaign. And in the book, he announces that he's going to choose Senator Lieberman as his running mate because he wanted a balanced ticket. He's a Reform Jew, and Senator Lieberman was an Orthodox Jew. and so we piggybacked off of that, and we came up with the top 10 presidential slogans of the Franken-Lieberman.
Oh my God! Okay, do you remember? Yeah, let's hear it.
Of course, yeah. Number one was, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your mother."
I feel like it's really appropriate that we're having this conversation on the first day of Passover.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my God!
So that was a ton of fun.
Oh my God!
We and one of the reasons why I was extra proud of that was the ringer in the contest was Christopher Hitchens, and he got up on stage and he had a cigarette in one hand and a glass of whiskey in the other hand, and was just riffing. And he was really
I don't think Washington is allowed to have that much fun anymore.
Yeah.
Not right now, anyway. Maybe again at some point. So, Dan, have you ever written a speech for yourself?
As a matter of fact, I have more than a few, but actually the very first speech I ever wrote, I wrote for myself. My senior year in college, I went to Harvard. They have a house system, so your sophomore through your senior year, you live with a group of people the entire time. It's like a dorm, but I got honored by being asked to give one of two senior dinner night speeches the night before graduation, and it was a chance to kind of reflect on our experiences together, both have some fun with it, but also, be some serious reflection. And I stayed up pretty much the whole night, the night before, agonizing over it. And I think I caught the bug a little bit, but I have to say, it's a very different thing writing a speech for someone else than writing for yourself. Just like it's very different writing a book for yourself versus writing a book for someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you get your start? How did your career begin? You're in Harvard, you're writing a speech for yourself, and then, and now you're a CEO of Gotham Ghostwriters. But what came in between, or what can you tell me about your very first, your beginning of your career?
I liked to joke that I got my start as a writer when I was about 7 or 8 because my dad was a Shakespeare professor. And he would review my homework assignments, writing basic, grammar in second grade. And he would correct them like it was a college.
Oh, my God.
And, when you're 7, 8 years old, that's pretty brutal. It kind of messes with your self-confidence. But then I look back and it really, helped me become the writer I
man. Everybody needs a tough editor, right? And that's just going to make us stronger.
Taught me exactly. And it set high standards. It taught me the basics of grammar. And so my first actual job writing was I got a column in my weekly hometown newspaper in high school. And then from there, I got a job as a part-time glorified copy boy at the Hartford Courant, which is the main paper in Connecticut. And then I continued to do some stringing work for them in college. I was an editor on the weekly college paper. And, I just, I knew that I would end up writing somehow professionally. And it turned out the Hartford Courant was hiring with major expansion right as I was graduating from college. And I, never thought I would go home again. I really felt like I, wanted to go out explore the world, but it was too good an offer to pass up. So I came home and actually lived at home for a year with my parents to save some money and pay off my student loans.
But tell me about that. You were telling me about a seminal moment in your creative development.
So I started off, I'm a sports junkie. And when I was a kid, I was a total sports junkie. And so I spent 2 years in the sports department covering local and college sports. And that was a lot of fun. But after a while, it kind of got a little repetitive. And I really didn't feel challenged in growing as a writer the way I wanted to be. So after 2 years, I switched to covering local news. And I got assigned to a small town in Northwest Connecticut called Canton, which was a really great classic Yankee country town because it had become a little bit of a bedroom community for Hartford. So there definitely were some more well-off white collar workers there. But then the other half of the town remained very rustic, a lot of agriculture. And in that part of the town, there was a classic country store. And the woman who ran it was this terrific woman who had, grew up in San Francisco, joined the Navy. And I forget the backstory of how she ended up in Canton. I think, she followed a boyfriend east or something. But she ended up buying this country store. And she was really funny and warm. And as you might imagine, in a small town, country store is kind of a gathering spot. She was a great source. So I would stop by there all the time just to see what was happening. One day I walk in and I see at the front counter, there is like a cushion set up like a throne. And there is a very large potato with a crown on its head. And I'm like, okay, I got to ask, what is this? And they said, that's the Elvis potato. And they tell me this story. They were out peeling potatoes one night for a catering job they were doing for a local party. And they came across this potato that had an eye on it that looked like a human head. And they're joking. It's like, we found Elvis. You know, this was the 80s and a time when, you know, Elvis was everywhere. And then they had the brilliant idea to, it was around the time that doing the Elvis stamp, and there were the contests. Should it be the old Elvis or the young Elvis on the stamp? So they decided, who is the potato look like old Elvis or young Elvis? And so they put out a little notebook. And of course, 10 people voted old Elvis, 10 people voted young Elvis, and then 80 people wrote in that it looked like something else. And when 100 people in a small town do anything,
it's news. Yeah.
So the combination of all that was like,
that's hilarious.
So I went to my editor, and he starts shaking his head. All right, let me call downtown. And he said, I have good news and bad news. The good news is the editors love the story. They want to put it on the front page. Bad news is you have an hour to write it.
A victim of your own success.
I'm having every bad... Exactly. So I'm having every bad Elvis and potato pun like coursing through my brain. And so I just sat down with a friend of mine and we started kind of running through it. Spent 10 minutes just kind of like, you know, almost like a purge. And then I hit the one that was the obvious lead, and then it just flowed from there. And so, you know, the lesson I took away from that, to answer your question along with punctuate the story, is that having a sounding board when you're stuck or when there's a high pressure situation can really be helpful, because, you know, it wasn't just that I kind of hit upon it as we were going through it. When I said it, he said, that's it. Right. And that kind of validation, because that was my instinct, but hearing it, you know, it clicked.
Well, that is a very mature and sensible takeaway. And I also have to say that the other takeaway is, of course, that Elvis sells papers and quirkies are good for sales.
Yeah. So the AP picked up the story. It went worldwide. For the next week, I got interview requests from
Mr. Potato Head,
places as far away as Japan. You know, a lot of people in Japan loved Elvis.
He was big in Japan. So are potatoes. Yeah, that's hilarious. What a great start to an illustrious career. But I want to ask you a little bit about your feeling for the work. I mean, it really came through when you were talking about your work for Senator Lieberman, but in more general terms, why does this matter to you? Talk to me about your mission in life and your impact in the world, and why you went into the business of writing words for others to say, and why that matters to you.
Sure. So, you know, the through line, not just for me professionally, but especially, you know, my work in politics and now what I'm doing now is, I'm convinced that ideas and the words we use to articulate them change the world. And the people who I'm convinced are most successful as political leaders, not just in winning elections, but in affecting change, have the ability to tell a story, connect with people on an emotional level, and persuade them to follow their lead. And, you know, that much of the work I have done, whether it's with Senator Lieberman or as a consultant, strategist, is really around that idea of persuasion, right? It's meeting people where they are, honoring what they believe, but then through the course of, making arguments that allow them to see that the idea you're putting forward is going to matter to them, is going to have a positive impact on ther life, their family, their community, their country. That's very powerful. And then we're seeing it with, everything from President Zelensky in the Ukraine to Greta Thunberg. They're very different. I mean, Zelensky's on the younger side, but he's not as young as Greta, right? But pre-internet, they never would have been as impactful as they are. But the internet has allowed us to, access voices that we've never heard before. And one of the things again, this is more in terms of what my current occupation and mission, one of the things I love about what we do is there are lots of people who have stories to tell, and they're just not writers.
Yeah.
And by being able to pair them with a partner, and that's very much the way we look at it. We use the term Gotham Ghostwriters just because it's a term of art and people know it. But we really use that as an umbrella term to cover collaborative writing. And we look at the writers and the editors that we pair with our clients as real partners and collaborators with them. And to be able to help them succeed in sharing that story, and in many cases, sharing the ideas and arguments for a cause that they believe in, or an innovation in their business. I feel still very much that it's an extension of the mission I got to have in political life, that we're helping people make the world a better place. Now, it could be purely through, telling a story that's, opening people's eyes to, a personal struggle someone had, and making them, help them identify with that and make them feel not alone. As we've seen with many memoirs, right? That can have a really profound effect on large numbers of people. So I don't purely limit it to like political books or big business books. Even memoirs and novels, all kinds of personal narratives have that potential to connect with people and touch them in different ways. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's so similar to, I feel like what you're saying echoes, my sort of mission in my career, which is to, I'm good at making words sound good and making great books. And that's my gift. And I'm here to, help. My difference in the world is to help you make a difference in the world. So I'm hearing a lot of the, similar sentiment in what you're saying. And now you're the CEO of Gotham Ghostwriters agency, and your agency is huge, right? You have like a network of 3,000 professional writers working for you. Tell me a little bit about like, who are your clients and what are they publishing?
Mm-hmm. So, we have a really diverse and fascinating mix of clients, all the way from, Fortune 100 CEOs, presidents of top global foundations and elite universities, down to, the owners of small businesses who started something that they're very proud of, and they want to be able to document it just for their family and posterity. Sometimes we're working with celebrities who have lived a very public life. A lot of times we're working with maybe, someone who's a Holocaust survivor or had a traumatic childhood and experienced all kinds of personal challenges, and they had to overcome that to be successful in whatever they did in life. And they want to share their story as a form of inspiration with other people. So it really runs the gamut.
That's incredibly diverse. All kinds of different folks and all kinds of different projects.
I would say the common element is that if they're doing a book, they want to produce a book that they're proud to put their name on. Right? They're not just writing a book to check a box. And therefore they care about the quality of the words and the language they're putting out there, and therefore they want to work with an accomplished writer. And what we're able to do, because we have this large, diverse network, and through them we can reach even a wider universe of writers and editors, is we can learn from them about what their priorities are, their style, their voice, and then be in a position to recommend writers who are going to be not just good for their genre, but for their priorities and their vision for the project.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's very much this idea of creating a partnership and thinking about a little bit, it's like dating, right? You can have your objective checklist, but a lot of times it's about
chemistry
trust and chemistry.
So much,
And if you don't have the trust and chemistry, it's not going to be a successful editorial
Yeah, you're not going to have any
so
fun.
we think a lot about that.
So if I'm listening to this conversation right now and I'm thinking like, oh, I've been wondering whether I should look for a ghostwriter, hire a ghostwriter, or try to write the book myself, or maybe I shouldn't be doing a book at all. What can you tell us about, what makes a really great candidate? Like, what would your sort of like ideal client be where you're like, yep, this person has all of the things that, we know that we can help them be successful because they bring this and that to the table. And maybe, the other side of that is maybe who's not in a good position to hire a ghost. And let's just take fee and budget out of it for a moment, but looking at those other qualities.
Right. Sure. I would say first and foremost, the most important thing we look for is commitment. Because as you well know, with the authors you work with, it's a huge emotional investment.
And I'm just going to interrupt you for a sec, just to say, like to some people that might sound like a bit of a surprise because, like, no, I'm hiring a ghostwriter. What do I need to be committed for? I'm going to, throw this project onto their desk, and then I'm going to go do what I'm busy with. So, talk to me about the commitment that is required in this arrangement.
Well, the thing is, if you're going to write and publish a book, there's many stages. The writing of the book is really just one stage, as you well know, right? There is the preparation, the conceptualization. Then there's the writing, but then there's the editing. And then perhaps most importantly, unless you're writing a book just to kind of like,
get it off your chest. Yeah.
Purge something, get it off your chest. Most of the authors that we're working with, and I think would say most authors in general, they're writing on the book for a reason. They want to, they want to sell books, or more likely, they want someone to know about their story. They want someone to know about their ideas. They want to shape or participate in a larger conversation. And in a case like that, then you have to, even if you're working with a ghostwriter, you have to invest yourself in the publication and the marketing, the promotion. And that is on its own a major commitment. So even if you're, using a ghostwriter, and the ghostwriter is going to write every word, and your involvement in the drafting of the manuscript is going to be minimal. That is rarely the case. But even in those cases, if you're publishing a book and you care about what happens with it, you're still making a big commitment. And therefore, one of the things we try to and be real transparent with our clients, or prospective clients, when we're talking with them, is sort of say, even if you're going to work with a ghostwriter or collaborator, it's a major investment of time and emotion. And it's important that you're prepared for that. And working with a ghostwriter, you still have to be reviewing drafts. You still have to do interviews. You still have to make it a priority in your life. And that's one of the first things we look for. The second thing we look for is there's clarity about expectations. So if someone says, I want to write a New York Times bestseller, and they have no name recognition, no platform, their story is very common. And again, that's not to be derogatory at all. But they don't have any of the elements or ingredients that you would look for. We have to be honest with them to sort of say, that's really unlikely. But if they continue to sort of say, no, I'm going to write a New York Times bestseller, then we're probably not in the best position to help them, because we feel like we're setting
and they're setting you up to fail, really. But let's put a finer point on that. I mean, you and I both have, like we're professionals in the space, so we know what those things are. But for those who aren't, so you just talked about what are the things that must be in place in order for a book to be a big success. You talked about platform. You talked about name recognition. What else what are those qualities that you were alluding to?
If it is a memoir or some form of narrative, it's got to be really compelling, and have that rare combination of being unique and distinctive, but universal and relatable. Right. That's hard. There's a lot of people who have, interesting, even very major accomplishments in their life, but the story is just not going to touch people in a way that is going to resonate with people enough that it's going to be able to become a bestseller. And then if it's a business book or a public affairs book, you have to have something really special, almost transformational to say about something that matters to a lot of people, right? Or you are someone like Joe Rogan, who has a huge fan base, and he could write his
grocery list,
supermarket shopping list, and publish it, and a lot of people would buy it.
Yeah.
Right? Most people don't fall into that category. So if you don't have that kind of star power, then it really puts the onus on the all those other ingredients.
Okay, so commitment and realistic expectations and those qualities that you talked about inherent in the material, that are not about the quality of the writing. Because a ghostwriter isn't, Rapunzel. They're not going to spin straw into gold, right? They're not going to be able to take when there's no there, then no amount of pretty words can bring substance to the book. So that is.
I just want to also add, though, the other side of the coin of clarity of expectations is clarity of motivations, right? Why are you writing and publishing a book?
Great.
Right? If people say, well, someone told me to write a book, that is a dead giveaway.
Everybody says I should write a book. Yeah. So is that, yeah.
Yes. And that's, it's okay if the idea came from someone else, but if you're not clear about why you're doing it, what you want to accomplish from it, then it's going to be really challenging to complete the book and have it be successful. Because the metric of success for a book varies greatly depending on who the author is, what the topic is, right? And it could be sales. It could be that it creates a platform and name recognition. It could simply just be that it creates a testament that if anyone ever reads this book, or, the people in your community find out about it in the library, is it going to do justice to you, your story, and your reputation, right? That could be simple enough a measure of success. But you have to have, the author has to kind of know that ahead of time for the book to then be aligned with those goals and have a chance to succeed.
That makes so much sense. And it's one of those hiding in plain sight things that people just often, it's right there, but unless you are conscious of it, you can't marshal your efforts in that direction.
Yeah. So we definitely have cases where they're clients who come to us, and sometimes they're clients with significant budgets, and we say, you know what, you're probably not ready to do this. And we wouldn't feel comfortable taking your money until you do have those clarity on your motivations and expectations. And in some cases, they've gone off and they've taken some time to think about it, or take care of other things they need to take care of, and then they come back to us. Other times, they either go somewhere else, or they recognize that it's
right. And we are going to talk about money in a minute, because that's a hugely important part of the equation. But yeah, I mean, we're digging into this a little bit. I want to hear more about what the ghostwriter can do for them, and what does the ghostwriter not do?
Well, let's start with the latter, because you already kind of touched on that a little bit. The ghostwriter can't, I'll use a different word. They can't turn water into wine. Right. Or straw into gold. You said, I say water into wine. It's they can help the author in terms of extracting stories
and ideas.
But they can't make them up.
But they can't have your idea. They can't have your ideas for you. They're not going to come up with. They're not going to write Harry Potter for you and have all of those creative thoughts and ideas. Right.
Now, but what they can do is, if you do have a vision, right, is they can help you refine it. They can help you come up with a structure or a framework for the book. They can even come up with a gimmick, right? Some of the best ghostwriters, even before there may be an agent involved, right, is it's a real collaboration, and they supply that creative pixie dust, and will come up with, a really catchy, sticky title and framing for the book that will make it
okay, great. So you have to come with your own ideas, but they can be kind of half-baked. They can be sort of, I mean, I'm saying that I don't mean it in a derogatory way, but what I mean is they can be, they don't have to, it doesn't have to be a watertight, like manuscript plan. You have to have ideas to share, but you can still be sort of in the question about like how this book should take shape, and the ghostwriter can help you get there.
Yeah. And another very crude analogy would be, the ghostwriter can come up with amazing packaging, right? But you've got to come up with what's inside.
Right. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah. Okay. So.
Right. And if there's nothing in the box, if it's an empty box, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter how pretty that bow is on top. It's still empty inside. I love that. Okay. So what does the process look like, Dan? If I'm a client, I come to you, you determine that, yes, I have the commitment. I have the clarity of vision. I've got something inside the box and I'm willing to go the distance of getting it out there. Maybe I even have a platform that, is okay and I'm growing it, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm your ideal client. I've got all this stuff going for me. What does the actual process look like? Walk me through it.
Sure. So, the first thing we'll try and do is help them think through a strategy for the entire project, right? So if they're an obvious candidate for traditional publishing, then it becomes easy. We help them write a proposal. We make some introductions to agents, and then assuming the book is sold, then we can, we'll work with them on the full manuscript. But then there's other clients who are, obvious candidates for self-publishing. And in that case, it's just, again, it's cut and dried. They just know that's the route they're going to go. We're going to help them write the book. And then we may help them figure out, which kind of self-publishing service is going to be. But then there's a large group in the middle that can kind of go either way. And it's really helping them through that assessment process, again, because there's no one-size-fits-all answer. It really is, weighing the pros and cons and the trade-offs for each approach to figure out, okay, what's the right path for your book.
Well, so far we haven't even started writing. Come on. That's a lot. That's a lot.
And then the step two then is once you have some clarity about what the path is going to be, then is be in a position to pair them with a writer, right? And then that's our search process. We'll do a debrief with the author, get a sense of their style, their expectations, how they like to work, their personality. Because like some personalities, if you have someone who's more shy and introverted, they're going to need to work with a writer who has a strong personality, a lot of self-confidence, and who can extract the stories and the key ideas out of the author. And then there's other authors who have very big personalities and they don't like necessarily to be challenged, right? And in that case, you need someone who has, a lot more, diplomatic skills and can manage big personalities. And again, that I think is a real advantage of our model and how we engage with clients is we're not just looking for someone with a resume, right? We're thinking about how this is a relationship and how
you're matchmaking.
And then it's matchmaking. And then we'll do a search. We'll identify some writers that we think are a good fit. We'll send resumes and writing samples to the client for each of the writers, and they tell us who they want to interview, and then we facilitate those interviews. And that's really the most important part of the screening process, because again, you can have the best resume in the world, you have great references, but if you don't click, and you don't have trust that this person is going to protect your story, protect your vision, then it's going to be a challenge having the collaboration make it through to the end, let alone be successful. At the end of that the goal is to have, a match, and the author feels like this, I really feel like this is the right person to work with. And then at that point, we'll broker an agreement between the author and the writer, and have it be balanced so that both sides feels like their interests are being protected. Because again, I think one of the issues that happens, particularly, if there's, for the ghostwriter side, if there's a literary agent involved and the ghostwriter's on their own, the agent will often, try to pressure them to commit to things that are very one-sided or too stacked in the interest of the author. And then a lot of authors, if they're, on their own and they're working with, they're finding a writer on their own, the writer naturally, and again, I'm not criticizing them or blaming them for this, but their natural inclination is to kind of have an agreement that plays to their favor. And then it's incumbent on the author to get an attorney or someone who knows the biz to kind of look at the contract.
It can be so hard for just a lone person out there hiring a high ticket service, to know whether they're getting a great deal or they're getting taken for a ride or somewhere in between, or it's just right. And like all of that is just, so your agency takes that anxiety and risk out of it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I love about our model and the work we get to do, which is that, it's rare in business where you get well compensated for bringing people together. Because, so much of business is adversarial, right? It's natural. In capitalism, I want to make as much money as I can from you, and I want to get the maximum amount of services from you, and you try and haggle. And then it's not that there's no negotiation, but in our case, the client feels really well treated because we're helping them find someone who can, it's solving a pain point for them. And for the writers, we're helping negotiate on their behalf, make sure they're protected, and we're bringing them good assignments.
Well, and that's so important because, like you said, trust is super important. A sense of collaboration and being on the same side of the desk is super important when you're going into a creative project. So I can imagine that if I'm an author hiring a ghostwriter, and one minute I'm sort of like negotiating against them and playing hardball, and now I'm supposed to, and then we've come to an agreement, but maybe both sides are feeling a little bit stung and bruised from the process. Now we're supposed to step into this warm partnership space where we just like trust each other and open up. That's not a super easy transition to make. So since we're speaking about money, I love the way that our conversation is segueing so beautifully from one point to the next, because I really do want to talk about money, and to the degree that you're able to, I know that these things are all how long is a piece of string, but what does it cost to, and I'm talking about, to what's the range, but also what does it cost at the really high end to get somebody great? Like what you just described is a huge amount of work, and
So one of the challenges in this field is, ghostwriters tend to be invisible. Right. And the market for their work is cloaked.
Yeah. How do they advertise themselves and say look, I wrote this bestseller, these 5 bestsellers, when they're not even permitted to openly admit that?
Yeah. In some cases, they're not. The top writers negotiate the ability to disclose to prospective clients, the projects they've worked on. But my point is, it's a very opaque field, and there's no standardization anywhere. And so for authors, it can get really challenging to figure out, is this a fair price? Is this reasonable? And again, one of the benefits of our model is that because we've helped broker, now hundreds of collaborations, we have a really good sense of the current marketplace and what people are typically charging, what the range is. And what we try to do, and when we're dealing with clients, even before there's any kind of negotiation or they're even considering a specific writer, is to help set their expectations and to sort of say, for the kind of book you want and the caliber of writer you want, this is what you should expect to pay. And that way, when we're going out and doing a search, we're working in a reasonable band for them, so that there's not going to be sticker shock when we present a writer who sort of says, well, I maybe want 10% more than the top of the range. Then at least the author can make an informed judgment to sort of say, I want to stretch, versus it's 100% more
that they had in their mind. They're like, I want a bestseller and I've got $10,000, and that sounds like a lot of money to me. So, give us the sticker shock now. Tell us how much this really costs.
So, what we try and do is like this, there's tiers in the marketplace, right? So to get a competent professional ghostwriter for a business book or a memoir, someone who's been doing this for a while, has, produced quality product, but is not an elite writer. The baseline is probably in the range of $30,000 to $50,000 for them, where they're going to be writing the full book. You can go a little lower than that, but what I typically tell our clients, if you're paying below $25,000 for a book of above 50,000 words, you're going to get what you pay for. And it's not going to be of the quality that is going to advance your reputation, make you feel good about And it's not really, frankly, a good investment.
Yeah, exactly. Because it was like, oh, I only paid $15,000. Well, that could be the most expensive savings you ever made, right? Like if that $15,000 that you spent on a ghostwriter who can't deliver a manuscript that is going to take you where you want to go, then that's a terrible waste and not actually a bargain.
Yeah. And then, the second tier of writers tends to be in that 50 to 100,000 range, where these are more accomplished writers. They will typically, again, if it's a business book, they'll have written books that have been published by Wiley and McGraw-Hill, and maybe one of the business imprints for HarperCollins or Simon & Schuster. And then the most elite writers are, in the anywhere from $150,000 to $300,000.
Oh, okay. You're the first. That's the first time I've ever heard a 3 at the beginning of that number. Woo!
Oh yeah. Well, I'll tell you right now. I mean, we've brokered a couple deals in the 300 to 400,000 range. I mean, it's rare, but
woo!
Now,
just hang on a sec. Who has that kind of money? Seriously?
Oh, billionaire CEOs.
Sure.
Tech entrepreneurs. Yeah. Now, the record to date that I know of, because a lot of this is publicized, so I can't say that this is the record, but the record that I know of.
There he is.
Sorry, that's the dog. The record was Prince Harry just sold his memoir, and he wanted to work with this elite writer, J.R. Morninger, who is an accomplished author in his own right. But he became a hot commodity as a collaborator by working on Andre Agassi's memoir, which both was a critical and commercial success.
Yeah, which is like hard to do both things. Or they're both high bars.
Yes, and so the reporting I've seen is that Morninger was paid about $100 million, $1 million. I know,
man.
I know.
Okay, first of all, I'm in the wrong business, and that's a lot. Yeah, but it makes sense when you understand all that goes into it. You've talked about and so when you talk about like an elite ghostwriter, let's just say not super unicorn elite, but like garden variety elite, somewhere around the kind of $100,000 mark. What are they going to do for that? So they're going to interview you. Would if this is a book of information, would that ghostwriter be expected to dig into some research findings? Would they be expected to do secondary interviews for, sort of like quotes and case studies, et cetera? Or
Yes. And, and that's one of the variables that goes into the cost is it's one thing if you're writing a memoir, you're
there's a one-stop shop in terms of the source.
Yeah. Versus if you're writing a real deep dive business book and you're going to do case studies, or you're going to interview experts who can, flesh out some of the supporting arguments you're making. That adds to the time and the work that the writer is going to do, and therefore that may
bump up the cost,
increase the fee that they're going to get.
So this is a huge investment for anybody to make in themselves, and you better, again, getting back to your motivations and your what you hope to get out of it being so critical to just entering into this endeavor. I want to switch gears for the last little bit of our conversation and talk about the feelings and drives that your clients or prospective new authors have around this whole activity. I know that a lot of people have big dreams for themselves, and they know that they've got a body of knowledge to share or an amazing life story. And in some cases, one of the things that hinders them is a sense of, being shy about putting themselves out there as a thought leader or exposing, telling their story, and that they worry that it is kind of an arrogant thing to do so, especially when it comes with the price tag of investing $30 or $40 or $50 or $100 or $150,000 into making that dream a reality. So what would you say to that, this idea of shyness and arrogance?
Well, if you're not comfortable putting yourself out there, then, being an author and trying to get attention for your book is probably not right for you. But so is, hiring a publicist, so is giving speeches. And so I would say that that hurdle or barrier to entry is probably going to prevent a prospective author from doing lots of things that are associated with, the run up to being an author, particularly if you're writing a nonfiction, either a business book, thought leadership, public affairs, something like that. That said, there are lots of reasons for, people who may even be very humble that a book can help other people, right? So it's not, there are definitely people who write books to get attention. A lot of people write books to inspire other people, to educate them, to entertain them. And that is the opposite of arrogant, right? That's thinking about making a contribution to, again, if you've struggled with alcoholism, there's a lot of people, when they hear stories of people who've overcome that, and maybe they've had, a unique path to recovery.
Yeah. So it's flipping it on its head. It's saying like, I've got this burning desire to share this, what I really do feel is a gift to give to the world. I'm worried that this is going to seem selfish by sharing it. And the antidote to that is by looking really closely at the impact and allowing yourself to plug into the difference that it will make in your reader's life, putting that front and center, and that can be the thing that gets you over this, this mental barrier.
Mm-hmm. And again, like I think there are lots of reasons to write a book, right? But definitely for a good chunk of the client base we're working with, these are people who have been successful in business or in political life, and they want to share the benefit of their wisdom with other people.
So maybe some of your clients, maybe your clients are like a particular segment of the population for whom concerns about being arrogant isn't as much of front and center.
Well, that's one chunk of the client base, and then there's plenty of other people who, again, the book is a bucket list. Thing. Particularly, we have clients who are writing novels, and they have this idea that they've been, thinking through for years, and they're finally like, I want to do this, but
that surprises me so much, because I've always thought that, like we don't, my company doesn't publish fiction at all. And I frankly don't read a lot of fiction. I'm not in that world a lot. But when I do, what I notice is the literary artistry. And, I have a conception or perception that, that fiction writing is hard to ghostwrite, because it's so, the value in it is so much about the writer's literary talent. So just to clear that up for me, how does that work? It's hiring somebody to paint a painting for you. Like, are you the artist there?
well, so here's what I would say to that. If you're talking about, Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury, or Dickens, or more contemporary, someone like Don DeLillo, right? The people who are creating these masterworks, or Philip Roth, a favorite of mine, right? Those are not the kind of books they're right, because they are works of art, and they are inspired and informed by the author's personal experience and what they want to communicate to the world. But there are plenty of other stories which are told in different media, from film and television and theater, where the storytelling is collaborative from the very beginning, right? There many movies there are multiple people who contribute to the script. Television shows, they have writers' rooms.
That's a great point.
Maybe 10 writers who are contributing to certain scripts or writing certain pieces of the show. And with certain kinds of novels, particularly whether it's like fantasy, sci-fi, romance, thrillers,
right? Genre fiction is
the story, the genre fiction. There's lots of similarities in terms of the kinds of stories, where there is a conceit, right? There's an idea at the core,
Right.
that there's a premise, and then maybe there's, some backstory that's been
Right.
invented. But how you then turn that into, a 250, 200 page novel, in the case like that, it's like, it's like a producer hiring a screenwriter to take the concept they've come up with and
Thank you.
flesh
That
it
makes
out.
so much more sense to me now, actually. And actually, even back to my analogy about like asking someone to paint for you, I'm thinking about that. Like, actually, there are tons and tons of contemporary visual artists who work in studios and have apprentices, sort of doing, actually creating their work. And it's more about the idea.
So the best known example of what I'm talking about is James Patterson, one of the greatest selling authors of our lifetime. He recognized that he could produce more books, entertain more people, and make more money if he built a team. So he has his own, in essence, ghostwriting operation, but it's not ghostwriters. He in his leadership, they come up with premises and create story arcs, and then they have their writing teams take those and turn them into they have an outline and they write the chapters. And then they have an editor come in and refine them before they go to Patterson, and Patterson will probably, review them. And
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
And what they've allowed him to do is he feels comfortable putting his name on the book because they're his ideas, and ultimately it's like a politician giving a speech.
Right.
Once they say it, they're his words, and they reflect on him and his reputation.
Or hers,
I think you're going to see more of that in the future. That there's a convergence going on in the arts and media, where film, television, novels, they're films that get turned into novels that get turned into films.
Everything is everything right now. A podcast is a video, is a we're a TV show, we're an audio program, we're all these different things, right? And
so many podcasts now are getting spun off into books.
So before we wrap up, I want to ask you.
Sure.
Let's talk for a couple minutes about access, about democratization of the publishing industry. You've just been talking about this collaboration and how it makes things possible for people that might not have been otherwise. So do you think it's true? Are you noticing more people wanting to write books? And like, there's a sense almost like that everybody has a book in them. I'm not convinced that is true. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. And what are you noticing about the different ways that people are finding, access points into publishing that weren't there before?
I am a huge fan of the innovations and democratization of publishing, the rise of many different forms of self-publishing, the kinds of hybrid publishers like that you run. Because authors are not all alike. They have different kinds of stories, they have different kinds of motivations, and different kinds of expectations for their book, and different reasons for writing and publishing them. And it's so wonderful now that the publishing industry writ large has evolved to be able to help authors who may have different priorities or different commercial prospects share their story with the community that they want to reach. And so overall, I'm a huge fan of this trend line. Now, it does mean that a lot of books that you and I probably would never want to read are getting published. But that's okay in the grand scheme of things, because that is a minor cost to pay for the enormous benefit that we're getting from so many people, whether they're people from marginalized communities, people who traditional publishers, thought could never sell books, to people with political ideas that may not be in vogue right now, but there is an audience for. There now is an opportunity for those authors to publish, and I think it's not an accident that it's this diversification, democratization trend is coming on the heels of the explosion of
Yeah.
social media, right? Social media has democratized
Access to audiences. Yeah,
communication.
that's right. Yeah.
That's right. And anyone who's on Twitter can reach the entire world. Anyone who's on Instagram can reach the entire world. And if you have something interesting and moving to say, if you're contributing to our public understanding, you can gain an audience without being rich or famous. And again, that overall is a net benefit to society and to culture. And I think what we've seen is this progression from people getting positive feedback on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. They have an audience, right? And they're sort of saying, people are interested in what I have to say. They like my story. And then they're starting to think, oh, well, maybe I should turn it into a book. And from our perspective, we're not passing judgment because we're not a traditional publisher. We don't have to make money from the sale of their book. All we have to sort of say is, do these people care about the quality of the book they want to put out into the world? And do they have that commitment we talked about? And if the answer to yes to both of those, then we're in a position to help them write a better book than they would on their own.
Oh, I love that. So it's now success is about understanding your value, the thing that you want to share, and your own motivations and goals, and then aligning those with realistic expectations, and partnering with the right kinds of support to reach those particular goals, given what your particular sort of collection of raw material looks like, or assets,
yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah, it's really well said.
I love it. I know it's a super exciting time to be in publishing. Because you're absolutely right. The marginalized voices, the dissenting opinions, those that are overlooked. But if you have if this is something that's really deeply embedded in you, something that is all about what you want to be and do in the world, then there is a way to make that happen. Whether that means that you're going to be scrappy and build your platform first, and then look to a traditional publisher to finance that project for you and put it out there in the world, or whether you have your own resources and can fast track it now, and fill in some of those gaps and other things that you may be dealing with. It's super exciting. Okay, Dan. So what about you? Have you, I should have looked this up earlier, but have you written a book of your own with your own actual name on it? Are you going to?
I
can't believe I'm just asking you that. And I was really should have been part of my homework.
No. Well, it would have been hard to find. I actually co-wrote a book with my wife. My wife is an Italian journalist and author. And she started working on a book on her own that she was asking me for some input on. And then she started to ask me to write little, chunks of text that she could plug in. And then her editor
That's like
really
hiring a
liked
ghostwriter by stealth.
the idea.
Hey, honey, what do you think of chapter one opening?
It wasn't hiring a ghostwriter. No, because the concept for the book evolved over time, because the book was about, it was almost like a cultural travelogue for Italians to understand America in the age of Trump, right? Because we got married 2 weeks before the election in 2016. Wow. And then she was writing the book in 2020, and it was going to be bookended by Trump's reelection. And so much had changed here, and and there was a lot of concern in Europe and in Italy, and specifically about what was happening in America. And so she used our relationship as a prism to look at the cultural differences between the U.S. and Italy and what was happening in the U.S. now. And as time went by, and I was contributing more to this, her editor just basically in her decided they wanted it to be a dialogue. And so she would frame each chapter, I would contribute a section, and then we would have our different voices woven in. And she was very gracious, and she gave me a with credit.
Awesome. So is it published, or is it pending?
It is. It's only published in Italy. It came out.
You're right. That would have been hard to find.
Unfortunately, it came out in October of 2020. Okay. Bad timing. We couldn't do any promotion in Italy in person for it. But the good news was it set the stage. We're going to write a sequel because right as we finished the first draft of the manuscript, we adopted a baby.
Congratulations.
And that led to a new ending for the book. Thank you. And so we're going to write a sequel that we're going to try to publish both in Italy and the US because it will have broader appeal. And it's about our tricultural family because our daughter's African American.
Okay.
So it'll be, a little bit about what it's like to raise a child, with a bicultural parents and mixed race family.
Wow, fascinating. Oh, well, we will watch for that. And in the meantime, where can listeners find out more about you? Of course, we're going to put, links to all your deets in the show notes, but for those that don't feel like going and looking at show notes, can you please just tell us your website or social handles, etc.?
Sure. Yeah, our website is gothamghostwriters.com. And on Twitter, you can find us at Gotham Ghosts. And
what about you? What about you personally, Dan?
On Twitter, I'm at Dan Gerstein. So yes, my name smushed together reads like Dan Gerstein, right. And my friends used to joke that
awesome.
I'm the least dangerous person they know with that name.
Oh my goodness! Well, I feel so. I feel so good about this conversation. It was so much fun to talk to you, and I learned a lot. And
thank you.
Just a tremendous joy to have you join me today. Thank you so much for all your wisdom and insight. And go to GothamGhostwriters.com, guys. Anybody who's wondering, if you've been sitting on the fence about getting your book out, and that you have those qualities that Dan identified as necessary, then don't be shy, take the plunge, make the call, and get that baby out there. Thanks, Dan.
And we offer a free 30-minute consultation. So don't hesitate. You don't have to make any commitments.
There you go.
Our goal is to help people and make you feel comfortable. And so happy to talk. And then if it makes sense, we can work together.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really hope this conversation has inspired you to give so much of your gift to the world that it expands you into your greatest possible version of yourself. Remember, it's not selfish just because we also benefit from it. And here's where I get to make a selfish request. New podcasts need all the help they can get. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate the show and subscribe to us on your favorite platform. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Selfish Gift Podcast. And send me a DM. I'd love to hear how you're sharing your gift with the world.